We're here with Frank L. Cole, the author of Champion's Quest, Die of Destiny. Frank, welcome to AASL National.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on here with you.
Absolutely. Now, Champion's Quest, the Die of Destiny, it follows a group of kids who, after playing a game in an old curiosity shop, they exit the shop and they find themselves transported into this fantasy realm, into the game itself, where they confront some really very real monsters. What inspired you to write this tale?
Well, I always like to say that Champion's Quest is like Dungeons and Dragons meets Jumanji. It's kind of like a good mix. But there's actually a store where I live. I live up in Providence, Utah, up north, and there's a little gaming shop. And in the book, they see this eyeball that kind of lures them into the shop. Well, there's an eyeball on the wall, and I saw that, and I'm like, I would love to write a story that kind of explores this gaming shop. And so that's kind of how it all began, and then it just transformed into something much bigger. So,
oh, great. Now, as you mentioned, the gaming elements in the book, were you a big Dungeons and Dragons or RPG player as a kid? And if so, how did that influence the book?
So I became more of a Dungeons and Dragons player in my older years. So I became more of a nerd as I got older, and I love it. But as a kid, there was a game called Hero's Quest, and so Champion's Quest is kind of like a tribute to that. But my dad would play this board game, and you would level up, and your characters would get weapons and treasure. And I was fascinated by that game. I loved it, and so yeah, so that it was a role-playing board game back in the day when I was a kid. So.
Oh, great. Now you're here at ASL. You've been discussing particularly confronting your fears in your novel. And though the book is written for kids, it does have goblins, ogres, and witches, and some other scary elements. Now, how do you, as a writer, balance that, creating a world and elements that are scary but not too scary for young readers? Was it difficult to find that balance?
I don't know if it was difficult. I love scary. I love putting creepy elements, and monsters are like my favorite. I love fantasy novels. That's what I gravitate towards when I read. So it wasn't hard for me to find that balance. I think one of the main ways to balance that is through humor, finding characters that can be funny and that can kind of create that break in the tense moments in the story. So I do like to write with humor and to kind of mix it up with the scary that happens. But yeah, I love the fact that these characters face off with really scary things, but they find their ways through them, and around them, and humor is a big element of that.
Mm-hmm. Let's continue talking about some of those other elements in the book, because it really stresses teamwork, overcoming anxiety, and you have characters from a bunch of diverse backgrounds. Can you kind of elaborate on some of those themes and why it was important to include those elements in books, especially for young readers?
So I myself deal with anxiety and panic attacks, and when my publisher came to me about creating a character that deals with panic attacks, this character in the book, his name is Lucas. He calls them the creepers, and that actually causes him the most fear. He could be facing off with a 10-foot ogre or a spider the size of a cow, and it's the creepers that's always kind of dwelling in the back of his mind that scares him the most. And I wanted to show a character that's fighting through that and finding ways to overcome that. I mean, the anxiety and the panic never really goes away. That's always going to resurface, but he finds ways through teamwork, through making friends, and embracing this leadership role that he's able to do it. So if I write a book, there's going to be a group of friends that are going on an adventure, because there's so much. That's what kids love. I think when I was a kid, I loved being around my friends. I wanted to be with my friends. And so friendship and teamwork is a huge part of what I write.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you hope ultimately that young readers, kids, will take away from the book when they finish it?
I think if I had a quote that would be printed on a T-shirt, it's that life can be hard, but can also be great. In this book, it's fun. They don't die. You can't die in the book, but it's like in Minecraft when you have the little heart meter and it runs down. They have to restart their adventure, which could be very disappointing and discouraging. But I think there are a lot of challenges, but it's just a lot of fun. And leveling up is fun. When you when all of a sudden you're now level 2, and here's your new weapon, and here's your treasure, and here are all the things you can buy. To me, that's fun. I think kids are going to be able to escape in this book. They're going to see themselves, because there are a diverse group of characters. I think anyone can find themselves in the book. So I hope that's what it comes across to the readers.
Awesome. Now you're here at AASL National, surrounded by school librarians. Do you have a particular memory from your childhood about a school library or a school librarian that has stuck with you through the years?
Yes, and in fact, I shared this in a panel earlier, and I love this story. When I was about 6, I grew up in Kentucky, and we had a little portable library. It was like kind of hooked onto the school, and I remember you would walk in and the library would shake, and it was just this, kind of like a trailer. And the librarian sat us down and shared this book. It was in October, and it was called The Tailypo. And it was the most terrifying story I've ever heard as a kid. And it stayed with me to the point where I knew I wanted to read more of scary stories and fantasy stories. In fact, the very first book I bought for my own family library was The Tailypo. My wife asked me why I did that. I was like, well, it terrified me as a child. I wanted to terrify my children as well. And I owe it to that librarian, because she shared that with us and scared us, and I just loved it. And I latched on, and I can still remember sitting on that floor, that dirty floor, listening to the story, and it stayed with me, 38 years later. I still remember that story. I brought it with me to the conference, in fact, that book. So.
That's amazing. Frank, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. That was awesome. I really appreciate the chance to be on here.
Awesome.